Alright guys, so in this video I'm going to go over some of the bigger upsets of college football in 2023. Believe it or not, there were not a ton of ridiculous, remarkable upsets. I guess you could kind of figure that based off the college football playoff and the crazy amount of undefeated teams we had, and even one team that didn't make the playoff, FSU, was undefeated. So there were a lot of teams at the end of the season that were undefeated, not a huge amount of upsets, but definitely some bigger point spreads to look at, including this one. So in this game, Miami was sitting at 4-0, 17.5 point favorites at home against Georgia Tech, who was 2-3 at the time. This was the game that Mario Cristobal completely blew when they could have taken a knee. They decided to run the ball, fumbled it. It's almost like, I don't even know how that's possible with Miami, but yeah, Miami ended up losing this game 23-20, and another down year. It's crazy that Miami actually did start off the season 4-1, only to finish, did they finish 7-6 because they lost to Rutgers in the bowl game? I believe so. And then Georgia Tech had just a strange average season. Their program, they got a decent quarterback that threw for a lot of yards, but overall, just a crazy upset there at the end. Georgia Tech going on the road as 17-point underdogs and winning outright. The next upset, although honestly, this probably isn't even, I'm surprised, Iowa State, they went on the road to Ohio University, so they played a road game against a MAC school. They were only 2.5 point favorites on the road at a MAC school, and they lost 10-7. This was like week 3, really early in the season. Iowa State had a really strange year. They started off really bad, but they ended up having a decent offense towards the end. But they lose to Ohio, and Ohio University, they were a good team throughout, but their starting quarterback got hurt. Unfortunately, another huge upset. This was North Carolina coming into this game, number 10 in the country, undefeated, hosting Virginia. They were around 24-point favorites in this game, and they lose outright 31-27. And this was good for me because I was really down on North Carolina. They started off the season 6-0. It was looking like I was going to be wrong on them, and then their season completely tanks with a loss to Virginia. Maybe Virginia turning around their football program a little bit towards the end of the season, but they're kind of just average either way. That was a terrible loss for North Carolina and really sent them into a tailspin. They were always kind of a team. I just didn't think they had enough talent around Drake May. They had lost several running backs to the NFL the years prior. And Malik Washington, he's an underrated receiver. He went for 12 catches, 115 yards, one of the best receivers in college football. Another big upset, Bowling Green going on the road, beating Georgia Tech as massive underdogs, 38-27. This was a very strange game because if you looked at it, if you turn this game on in the middle of the first quarter, Georgia Tech was up 14-0. You would think, oh, they're going to cruise to a 49-7 win, la-di-da-di-da. It's an ACC team hosting Bowling Green. But then Bowling Green scores 28 unanswered points and ends up easily beating Georgia Tech. That's just a terrible loss for Georgia Tech. There's really nothing else you can say when it comes to a game like that. Although Bowling Green, they were a little bit better this year. At least they made a bowl game. They faced Minnesota and lost. The next big upset, a lot of people remember this one. It is Colorado, 21-point underdogs. Opening weekend, they end up beating TCU. And unfortunately, this was kind of like a double whammy. You had a bunch of casual people who started watching Colorado because of Deion Sanders, and because they're casual, they think TCU is this great team because TCU made the national championship last year. Of course, these casual people don't understand the context with TCU getting extremely lucky in a weaker Big 12 conference, winning all those games very close towards the end, or else they could have easily had 3 or 4 losses last year. They end up making the national title, against all odds, and then get destroyed by Georgia. I said TCU would lose 5 or 6 games this year. There were a lot of people that were pissed off that TCU started the year ranked 17. They said, you need to respect them more. They made the national title. I said, nope, they're not very good this year. They got very lucky towards the end of games last year against average opponents. They really should have lost to Baylor last year. But either way, and then all the casual people are like, oh my God, Colorado just beat the team that made the national title. And it's like, you just don't have any context. This TCU team does not recruit at that level. It was very shocking they made the national championship. And now we look at both of these teams. It's funny because TCU actually was not as bad as their record if you look at the analytics, but they did finish with like 5 losses, and then Colorado finishing 4-8. They started 3-0, but you could tell Colorado, their defense was just not good. They barely beat Colorado State, and it took them double overtime in that game. But this, if you just base it off a point spread, was the biggest upset of the 2023 college football season. Texas State goes on the road to Baylor and wins outright, dropping a 40-burger. The Auburn transfer QB, TJ Finley, 298 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, sitting 27.5-point underdogs. They win this game outright. Kind of maybe a watered down upset in terms of like normally every year we get a team that's like 40-point underdogs and they win outright. But this was the biggest one, 27.5-point underdogs. Baylor, you got to feel bad for Baylor. Baylor might be the most bipolar program in college football. They're either really good or just horrifically bad. But in that game, you start off the season 27.5-point favorites, you lose outright, and you allow a team to score 42 points. It's just not a good situation. And then just some other upsets. You did have Texas go into Alabama and beat them by 10. It's kind of like a full circle thing, considering Texas and Alabama both lost in the semifinal game. But yeah, Texas went into this game 7.5-point underdogs. It is kind of crazy looking back on it, considering Jalen Milroe was so raw as a quarterback. Quinn Ewers, really impressive this game, kind of like his breakout game, and really put Texas on the map, going on the road in Bama and winning. But Alabama came back, finished the year winning every game, beating Georgia, making the playoff, but then losing to Michigan and Texas. They had a loss to Oklahoma, but they end up making the playoff and losing to Washington. This was actually not even an upset. If you look at the point spread, Notre Dame was 2.5-point favorites, but this was just such a random game, and you could tell that everyone knew USC was just not a good team. USC was the number 10 team in the nation. They were 2.5-point underdogs to the number 21 team, and they came into this game undefeated. USC just had no defense. They got destroyed in this game. And then USC went into a tailspin. They could have easily lost more games. They almost lost to Arizona even before this. So Notre Dame destroys them. And then this was the week 1 upset, the Monday night game. Duke beating Clemson. Clemson coming in ranked number 9. There was a lot of hype around Will Shipley as a junior, Cade Klubnik as a sophomore, and Duke just kind of a boring game, 28-7. Riley Leonard, he had a weird year where he got injured early, and Duke in general just completely fell off after they started like 4-0. It's unfortunate with injuries, but that was a really good start to their year against Clemson. That was just a strange game in general. Very rarely do you see like a primetime game that Duke hosts. Kind of just an odd situation. But yeah, Clemson definitely had just a letdown of a season. They finished the season strong, so I guess maybe the narrative is better for them going into next year, but that was not a good game. And then this one, how about Northwestern? What a year Northwestern has. This is what Northwestern always does. When there's actual expectations, they go 3-9. When there's no expectations, they have a good year. And honestly, people thought this year Northwestern might go 0-12 after the whole Pat Fitzgerald saga, but they go on the road, and Wisconsin coming into this game as like 10-point favorites. What a letdown of a year for Wisconsin. I guess they played decent against LSU in the bowl game, but LSU really wasn't playing, or LSU had a bunch of opt-outs, but you can't lose to Northwestern at home after the year that Northwestern had, or after the offseason that Northwestern had. It's just a terrible situation all around. You also had South Alabama go on the road to Oklahoma State and win 33-7. Now, South Alabama was only 7.5-point underdogs in this game, so it wasn't like a crazy upset, but the margin, 33-7, South Alabama. I mean, South Alabama, they're a juggernaut 7-6 team. They had a bowl game against Eastern Michigan and won 56-10. But what a strange year for Oklahoma State, losing that game, beating Oklahoma in Bedlam, They ended up making the Big 12 championship game and then got crushed by Texas. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.